And finally, iodine. So people eating plant-based are definitely at higher risk for iodine deficiency. Why? Number one, we do tend to avoid iodized salt. And number two, we do not consume the common sources of iodine, which are fish and dairy products. So if you look at the iodine intakes and status of vegans, well, they have shortfalls. We have multiple studies showing vegans having lower than optimal intakes and status where iodine is concerned. But the risk is highest in places where they have low iodine content in their soil. And in North America, we have reasonable iodine content in the soil. But in Europe, we have some places like Italy and the UK and even Finland. A number of the countries in Europe really have very low levels of iodine in their soil. Iodine deficiency causes goiter if it's severe, which is an enlarged thyroid. And your thyroid enlarges to try to trap iodine. And it can cause cretinism, which is the #1 form of mental retardation in the world. It can cause stillbirth and miscarriage. So it's really, really important that women who are planning on getting pregnant, that they be iodine replete. Mild deficiency, even just mild deficiency, can rob your baby of 10 to 15 IQ points. And this can very significantly affect learning ability. So if you look at the RDAs, you're looking at about 150 micrograms for anyone over the age of 14 years, a little bit more during pregnancy and lactation. But look at this. For babies, birth to 12 months, you're looking at 110 micrograms for birth to 6 months and 130 for babies 7 to 12 months. That's a lot. When you look at the relative weight of a baby versus an adult, it's almost as high as adult requirements. So it's a very important nutrient. So what are the sources? Well, iodized salt is a source. Seaweed and seafood are huge sources. Dairy is a source because iodine is used to clean cow teats. It's not that it's naturally there. It's there because we use it in cleaning the teats. Some grain products, iodine is a dough conditioner in those products. Some fruits and vegetables are reasonable sources as well, and eggs are a source. If you look at the iodine content of common foods, you can see seaweeds between 16 and almost 4,000 micrograms in a gram of seaweed. It's unbelievable. And then you've got cod, and then iodized salt, and then milk, yogurt, eggs, tuna. You know, this is all animal products. And then when you go down to look at the fruits and vegetables, you're looking at between about 3 and 12 or 13 micrograms in a serving. So they're fairly low amounts. And so it's really hard to get enough just from fruits and vegetables and even grains. So for 150 micrograms of iodine, we could use a supplement, whether it's a multi or a single nutrient iodine supplement. Iodized salt, you can get iodized sea salt without other additives, which you would want to read the label and make sure there's not these what do you call, to make the salt flow properly. There's sometimes additives that you really don't want, but you can read the label. And you don't want to be eating a lot of salt anyway, but you can get enough from about 2 mils, which is about a half a teaspoon. Will give you enough. And now seaweed is, to me, a healthier choice. It's got a lot of value. So you can get in about a tenth or a 16th of a teaspoon of kelp, of kelp powder, you'll get about 150 micrograms. That's just a tiny sprinkle. You don't even taste it in your soup or on your salad. That's a very reasonable way. Nori is the lowest in iodine of the seaweeds. You need about 1.5 sheets of nori to give you 150 micrograms. And then rame or dulse, you need a half a teaspoon. So it's, again, quite concentrated in iodine as well. So these are really good choices. The amounts in seaweeds vary so widely, and it's important to know that the upper limit is 1,100 micrograms. If you exceed that, you can end up with thyroid issues. And so we need to be careful of not overdoing the seaweed and just being really conscious, especially if you're using kelp. You can very easily consume toxic amounts. So if you're using kelp, it's very tiny amounts. What about the goitrogens in foods? Well, goitrogens are substances in food that can reduce the thyroid's iodine uptake and our production of thyroid hormones, but they're usually only a problem if someone has thyroid disease or iodine intake is insufficient. So let's say you're on a raw food diet and you're not eating seaweed, and you're eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables and a lot of goitrogens. It can actually contribute to your problems with making enough thyroid hormone. So what foods are goitrogenic? Well, cruciferous vegetables, flax seeds, peanuts, pine nuts, peaches, pears, strawberries, millet, soybeans, sweet potatoes, spinach, and green tea are all fairly reasonable sources of goitrogens. So should we avoid them? Absolutely not. Healthy people don't need to avoid these very nutritious foods, but we need to make sure we get enough iodine. Some people with thyroid disease may need to moderate their intake of goitrogens, and there are ways of doing that. So if you cook, just steam lightly your goitrogenic vegetables, that will help to reduce the goitrogens. You can ferment the vegetables, that also reduces the goitrogens, and just increase the variety of foods that you eat. So don't focus on just millet as your grain, for example. Vary that so that you're not getting as much of the goitrogens. And then where thyroid function is concerned, we also need to be aware of getting enough selenium. And of course, the richest source in a plant-based diet is Brazil nuts. Vitamins A, D, iron, and zinc are also very important to thyroid function. And the other thing we need to know is if you have some problems with thyroid, you may have compromised ability to absorb vitamin B12. And so you need to be very conscious of your B12.